Welcome back, everyone. Episode 53, the Second Look Sports Show. We had to get everybody on this pod. It's the post-trade deadline conversation. Alex Mandarino, Justin Arenburg, Cristian Ceniti, Brandon Brown here with you. And I feel like we kind of plan to go into this conversation with a lot to talk about. There's certainly things to talk about, but man, that was a slow and quiet, almost death of the trade deadline. And we can kind of start there if we want, fellas. Like, if anyone has theories or just anyone has any thoughts on the reason that the trade deadline maybe didn't hit like we kind of expected it to. And Brandon, maybe I'll go to you first to kind of kick the conversation off. Are you surprised that we sort of had a bit of a quieter NHL trade deadline, or was this kind of anticipated with maybe some new rules or with the standing of the NHL?
No, I mean, I was definitely surprised, mostly because of, and this is every year, it feels like there was a ton of names out there, a ton of teams that were looking to kind of upgrade or sell off pieces. So it kind of created, I think, a situation where there was a lot of hype and anxiety for people waiting for, the day of to kind of get going. And we saw some movement throughout the week. So I think it gave people an idea that this trade deadline was going to be, one of those big movers where we saw tons of picks and players and prospects moved from different teams, but it just didn't happen really. And I think you're right about the whole point about different rules. I know people have brought up like the playoffs salary cap and everything to do with that, and how much the new double retention rules. Exactly, Justin. Like, there are a few different things that I think contributed to it, but for the most part, I just think that prices were maybe a little bit too high for teams that were looking to sell off pieces. And like I said, some of the earlier moves in the week kind of, I think, led to that as well. We saw some pieces move for maybe some surprising prices, and I think that's what maybe gave some other GMs some pause about what they were going to give up and what for they wanted to get back. So I think that's just kind of everything together kind of led to a poor, entertaining trade deadline at least. So
Yeah.
I would
Anyone
agree
else
with
with
that.
any thoughts on that? Yeah, Justin, like, do you think there was any other reasoning, or is that just like a fair assessment?
I think the double retention is probably the biggest thing that we saw. Like, obviously the cap, playoff cap is like a thing now, but I don't think that's as big as the double retention, because in order for the double retention to work, you need to make a trade by December 2nd, I believe, for it to actually work this season. I think that's just unrealistic. You're not going to see a lot of teams make a December 2nd, basically mini deadline to go out and acquire someone and then use a double retention on them later in this year, or in the same year, sorry. So I think that had a major factor. But yeah, like Brandon's point about just players being out there, it felt like a year where there was so many players out there, maybe the most we've ever heard in terms of what could be out there, and then just not a lot of players moved. Obviously, we got Nazem Kadri at the end of the day. We had Braden Shen and John Carlson as the three big trades, I would say. But in terms of like a movement with a lot of guys, it just wasn't there as what you expected. There was a lot of minor moves, but like even then it wasn't a lot like you would have expected.
A lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda. Like we had a lot of talk going in about certain names, and not a lot of those maybe names moved. I think just one other wrinkle to throw in here. I agree on all the points, like the playoff cap and the double retention, but even just the rising cap in general, sitting at, what is it at this year, right? It's like at 90, 98 or 95.5, I think, right? 95.5, 104 million next year. There isn't a lot of contenders that had to, like, we know that the Oilers are one of them that had to move out a contract to make things work, but there wasn't as much of that as usual. A lot of these contenders didn't have that type of pressure with the cap ceiling. You look at a team like the Leafs who pivot here to being a seller with their expectations, and they put Tanev on LTIR during this week. And I 100% thought that was with the idea of taking on some bad money. And a team like the Leafs that we know can spend money out the wazoo didn't really do that this deadline, right? They sold off guys, but they could have also brought on some more assets by taking on bad money, but there just wasn't teams that needed to do that. There was less of that pressure there. So I think that's another factor as well, and that's not going to change anytime soon, right? Like the cap is going up, up, and up. So yeah, that's just another observation I'd make.
100%.
Yeah, and they're projected to have 24 million next season. like the Toronto Maple Leafs in cap
Yeah, that's
space.
before any
Before
RFAs,
contract, yeah,
UFAs,
sure.
whatever. But going into the summer on July 1, that's the number. Yep.
Yep. Yep. And it really quickly earlier in the week was a buyer's market, which was interesting because, at least from a Toronto Maple Leafs perspective, being in Toronto, ironically, this is the one year that you want it to be opposite. And it ended up transitioning more into a seller's market after a couple of the first trade dominoes seemed to fall throughout the week, sort of as you alluded to, Brandon. But either way, it does feel like it's becoming less prominent of a big trade explosion happening on trade deadline day or even the night prior. That being said, there were certainly trades. I just did some math. If you don't include John Carlson's trade, that did technically happen on the morning of March 6th, which was trade deadline day, 6 trades before 2 p.m. I know it's normally slow throughout the day. Brandon, you alluded to it, the show for JD earlier on. Not a whole lot of stuff to talk about. It started to sort of avalanche as we get closer to the trade deadline itself. No pun intended, Nazem Kadri heading to Colorado, one of the bigger trades. Was there a trade that was the most surprising to you, or was there a big name that you sort of you guys saw that like was unexpected, or maybe what was the sort of biggest impact trade do you think of the day? Maybe Christian, will go to you first for this one if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna point out 2 trades in particular, and one we already have mentioned there. I really like that John Carlson to Anaheim trade, and I think that one 100% snuck up on everybody, maybe even Ovechkin, who said this is the saddest day of his career, the day where Carlson goes out the door. So even Chris Patrick, the Caps GM, was like, "This is so weird to say." Someone asked him like, "Could you re-sign Carlson?" In the offseason, is like, "This is very weird for me to say, but I can't talk about John Carlson because he plays for another team." He couldn't wrap his head around the own trade that he made. So I did love the surprise factor of that deal. Maybe we could have seen it coming because he is a UFA, pending UFAs. Maybe you should just throw them all out there as potential trade options. It's not like the Thomas Hurdle we had a couple years ago with so much term that came out of nowhere. But I really like the fit there. And guys, Anaheim's a first place team now. This is the Pacific in general is kind of
crazy.
going up and down all around. They're only a point ahead of the Ducks, but I really like that trade. I like the fit, and the price is, as far as rentals are concerned, for an offensive defenseman, it wasn't an outrageous deal. He is 36 years old, but that one, and just very quickly, the Garland trade. Garland's one of my favorite players in the league. I liked that one for Columbus.
I
Weird
thought
to
they
think
fleeced
that
them.
it was second and third, I believe, is what it was. He's
Yeah.
has a contract extension that hasn't kicked in yet, so I think he's got a 6-year deal that's coming in. Interesting to think that had Vancouver opted to trade him last year, they probably could have got more, I would think.
Yeah.
So it's that's interesting that having all that term attached on it actually lowered the price that Columbus paid and what Vancouver got back. But yeah, those are the 2 that I'd highlight.
Yeah, I would agree with the Garland one. The Garland one was, my personal opinion, is the perfect player for Columbus, and it has that snarl that Columbus plays with. And then I think that's the cheapest one that you like look at and you're like, oh wow, they only paid a second and a third for Connor Garland. Like, I would have expected a first round pick for him, or a better prospect, to be honest, going back in return. The one trade I would say that like caught me off guard probably the most, I'm just double checking. Yeah, it's Corey Perry in a good way. Like
I like
Tampa
that.
Bay, what we heard from going into the deadline was Corey Perry was not moving. He was even talking about extension. And then the morning of it, I guess Ken Holland just went to him and said, "Are you willing to move your no move or waive your new no move clause?" And he just said, "Yeah." If I'm going to like a team like Tampa Bay, and he goes to Tampa Bay. So I like this move for Tampa Bay. It's a guy that fits in. He's still productive at 41 years old or something like that right now. So
Yep.
I really like this. I know that there are people losing their minds right now that a 41-year-old Corey Perry fetched a second round pick and Scott Lawton fetched a third round pick. I know that I saw that as Discord yesterday, but Corey Perry has more value just because of what he's able to do and how he's able to fit in, and the fact that when it comes down to playoff time, he's going to be able to perform in the playoffs. Like, he's a great playoff performer. So hopefully it doesn't mean that just because you get Corey Perry, you go to the Stanley Cup final and you lose. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about contenders and, playoff performers, I think, the maybe not the most surprising trade, but certainly maybe the most impactful one, I think could be the Nazem Kadri move.
Yeah.
Obviously, Colorado going out and acquiring a center from the Leafs earlier in the week. I think most people thought that was kind of their move at that position, and then to go out and get Kadri, it just completely solidifies their center ice position, and it could be one of the best in the league. So for a team that's already, setting benchmarks in terms of wins and regulation losses earlier in the season, they've clearly been the best team in the league, and I think they've only made themselves better, which I think should be scary for the rest of the Western Conference. But in the East, I really like the move by Detroit to bring in Justin Falk.
Mhm.
I know they were
Wow.
searching for a defenseman. I think he does fit their system, and I think you have him with a guy like Sider, and even if they're not playing together, it's just two dynamic guys who can move the puck really well, and I think it kind of just continues to build on what the Red Wings are trying to do and the way that they're trying to play. So I'm excited to see how he fits in the system. But those are the two that kind of stuck out to me yesterday. Obviously,
I'm not gonna lie, the Falk one, I thought that Detroit gave up a lot. I for how old Falk is and his game isn't where it once was, I thought it was a lot. I do understand the fit, but I just thought it was a lot.
I think the issue with that one is just there wasn't really like outside of like they were interested in Myers. Obviously, Ekman Larson was maybe a similar guy to Falk that you could see fitting in. But outside of
And
that, like
Risto.
yes, but obviously Ristolainen didn't move. So I
Yeah.
Yeah.
mean, when it comes down to it, I don't know if they had much choice but to pay the price. And obviously, Steve Eiserman's ready to kind of make the jump. And you got to give credit to a guy like that. It's hard to take that kind of risk when you haven't, been back to the playoffs yet. You're still kind of figuring out what your team's going to look like in the future. So to be able to take that jump, I do credit him. And maybe it doesn't work out, but I do think it was worth the risk there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think it's ultimately like Iserman sort of had no choice but to make a move. Like you're trending towards this team actually sort of in a good position. The chances are you might be playing like a Buffalo Sabres in the first round if that's the case,
Yeah.
and that could go either way. They're both teams that have not made the playoffs in a significant amount of time. And Falk, like you said, does fit the system. I think maybe it's a situation where the market earlier in the week sort of set, especially when you see like a Uyghur move early on and a lot of the right-handed shot defensemen. You see a guy like Falk who, okay, ultimately, regardless, could fit sort of really well on that deep pairing with Sider or whoever he ends up playing with there. The move that was interesting to me, I like how we kind of all had some different opinions on different trades. I was interested in the Shen move.
Yeah.
Not because I was
Yeah.
surprised that he got moved, but we talked about it off air. I still am a little bit surprised he got moved, maybe just at the amount that he makes and the amount a couple years left on his deal. But the Islanders are sort of in this weird place where for a number of years they were an older team and they're sort of trending in a younger direction. Callum Ritchie, Matthew Schaefer, and the like, but they still have a lot of older guys on their team. And so
Mhm.
you definitely shored up that second line center. Like Braden Shen slots in perfectly there. You get Pajot that can slot in a little bit lower on the totem pole. But the Anders Lees, the Cizicases, you have all these guys, like even Bo Horvat's a little bit older. They bring in Andre Palat. So it's a bit of a like, what sort of direction are you going? But that being said, with these younger guys in that organization, a Shen is a guy that comes in and immediately makes your locker room better. He immediately brings pedigree in winning the cup with St. Louis. So that's the kind of guy that you're getting in the locker room. So I think it's one of those where maybe they're not going to push towards the Stanley Cup this year, but he is with the squad for another year or two, and that can kind of just sort of send a ripple effect throughout the organization. So
And I
I'm
do
interested in that.
with that Shen deal, I do like the fact that like a lot of people have been talking about it. Like, if this is the Islanders of last year, there's no way in hell he's waiving his no movement clause to go to the New York Islanders. It's the Matthew Schaefer effect. It
Mhm.
really is. Matthew Schaefer being on this New York Islanders team has elevated their play in terms of just entertaining to watch from a value point in general. Because last year they were so boring. They've been boring for the last couple of years, but then it makes players want to play with guys like him. And they also have a couple great prospects in on their way as well in the cupboards that they didn't give up in this deal, which I really thought they might give up one. Obviously, you have one that's playing right now in Callum Ritchie, who they got in the Brock Nelson deal from Colorado. But then in the 2025 draft in the first round, they got Matthew Schaefer, or I think, yeah, Victor
Victor Eklund, yeah.
Yeah, Victor Eklund. I was thinking of William Eklund in the moment there for 1 second.
Yeah.
Victor Eklund, and then they also got Keyshawn Aitchison as well. So
Yes.
I think that like the New York Islanders have done the right thing. I don't think they overpaid for Braden Shen. I think that it is a substantial payment, but I do like Braden Shen, the player, and I like the fact how their lines shape up now with Bo Horvat and then Shen as the 2C, and then Pajot slots in at the 3C instead of a 2C. And then you can also keep Barzell on the wing, which I think is a better position for him overall anyway. So I just really like this move for the New York Islanders. And the craziest part about it that I think that we have to realize is that the East is wide open. Like, if the playoffs start today, the New York Islanders in the first round get the Pittsburgh Penguins. So they can very easily be one of the final 8 teams in the NHL this season. And I think that is something people are probably underestimating or crediting or under realizing right now.
The idea that one of those teams are like they have to be a second round team. One of them just has to be if they play each other. That is that is definitely flying under the radar. Are you guys interested in some buyer beware talk? Like, what are the deals that you kind of said, ooh, like why did you do that? Because there's 2 teams in particular, and it's more like their deadline on the whole that I have in mind.
Yeah, go for it.
I had to double check. So been lots of Edmonton talk because their deals kind of we have the Jari one early, and then you have the Connor Murphy deal for a second round pick.
How'd that go
Offloading
last night as
Mangiapane
well?
for Dickinson. Yeah.
How'd that go last
so
night?
so that Mangiapane deal, right? You're sending Mangiapane and a first to Chicago. You get Dickinson and Colton Dach. And that the basis of this deal is that you're getting off Mangiapane's $3.6 million next year. All right, so there we go. We have a price established for what it takes to get off $3.6 million in 2027. I had to double check this. Ryan Strome, what did it take the Anaheim Ducks to get off Ryan Strome's $5 million? And just so everyone knows, he only has 9 points for the Ducks this season. Like, he's not been good. What did it take for the Ducks to get off of Ryan Strome's $5 million for next year?
A 7th round
pick. But
I don't know if I have to say anything else.
Here's the thing, though.
Okay, what's the thing? Tell me,
Calgary
please.
also needs
Jason
to get
Dickinson's
to
worth the first? Is that? Okay.
Calgary also needs to get to the cap floor. That's a part of it. Like the fact
No,
that
Calgary... I'm just talking about like the Calgary part of it. What, like it's more about Anaheim and the pressure to get off of that money. It took them a 7th round pick. Like, did the Ducks never talk? I listen, I get they are competing, so maybe that means that the Ducks would never, or the Oilers wouldn't do a deal with the Ducks, whatever. And okay.
Well, they didn't even give up a 7th round pick. They got a 7th round pick. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, so
yes. Yeah. It actually cost them nothing. Yeah. They got something.
They literally just gave up. And it's not like they're a team that's in cap hell right now. They had $44 million of cap space after they made the John Carlson deal left.
What would it have cost the Oilers to just send Mangiapane to Chicago without getting back Dickinson and Colton Dach? Like, were those 2 so important to the deal that it inflated the price from whatever to a 1st round pick? So that's the first one I had to point out. Like, it was already, when the Mangiapane trade happened, we were already like, okay, what's going on here? But that Strome trade, that one really highlights it for me. And then Buffalo, the 2 moves that they make 2 trades. Actually, sorry. They make 3 trades yesterday.
3 trades, yeah.
They make, 2 of them are March 5th. One is March 6th in the deadline period. First, they get Sam Carrick from the Rangers, costing them a 3rd and a 6th. Sam Carrick also has another year on his deal, $1 million. Okay. Logan Stanley and Luke Shen from the Jets for Isaac Rosen, 22-year-old prospect, a 2nd rounder and a conditional 4th, and Jacob Bryson. And then a 7th for Tanner Pearson. I look at this deadline period for the Sabres, and I basically just say, like, outside of, we know the Parayko thing and how that fell through, there has to be more trades that fell through where other players had Sabres on their no trade clause and no move clause, because this legitimately looks like we had to go and get anyone that has no trade protection and bring them in, because everyone we tried to get said no to us. I love the Sabres this year, love their story, don't love their deadline.
I think the Sabres, this is going to be a situation where it's going to take a couple of years to get off the people's no trade list. Like it's going to be more than just like prove to us this year that you're in the playoffs. It's going to have to be like you're at least 2 to 3 years of you're in the playoffs battling for players to take them off their no trade list. And that's kind of what you're seeing this year. I would assume that's kind of the reason why Parayko wouldn't waive, obviously the family side as well for Parayko. But I I kind of disagree because I do like the addition of Logan Stanley and Luke Shen. I do. I think that makes their decor a lot scarier. They got 7 NHL defensemen that you can roll out. Like it's a very deep decor now, and I do like the fact that they are massive on the back end as well. I'm pretty sure the smallest guy now is like 6'3". So it's just
Scarier is the right word. I mean, if Luke Shen or Logan Stanley was in that game against the Penguins, maybe maybe someone's getting some retaliation on
yeah, you
Evgeny
know what I
Malkin.
mean? Like, and like that's also a thing as well. Like, you look at that Buffalo team. What's the one thing like you always think about? Like they have Greenway for toughness, but outside of that, they don't really have anyone on the back end that was going to stand up for anyone. Luke Shen will stand up for people. Logan Stanley's not afraid to chuck knucks. Like these guys are tough, and I do think this is something that Buffalo needed, and I'm happy that they got it because I think that it makes them a team that like I don't want to face them in the playoffs if I'm a team like the way that their forward group is playing and their defense. I don't think it's worth facing them in the playoffs. That is a scary team.
Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much look at Buffalo and say they probably feel good with what they've got. Like Parayko was probably the cherry on top for them. Everyone, when we all thought that deal was going to be consummated, everyone was looking at that decor going, "Is this the best in the league? Is this one of the most, unique teams now?" And they played so well with the group that they have that I can understand the idea of thinking, "Hey, we're still projecting to grow at some point. We don't need to, try to throw assets around for somebody that they maybe didn't want or that things, kind of settled on." So I don't know. The buying teams I thought did pretty well. It's the sellers that I think kind of got screwed here. It's like you look at teams like the
Yeah.
New York Rangers and obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm sure there are other teams as well. Like they had guys that they had clearly, you know, put out there and that were ready to move, but clearly, whether the asking prices weren't there or they just weren't satisfied with what they were going to get back, it's tough to look at teams like the Rangers and the Leafs and say, hey, they didn't do much. Like you talked about Rangers and the Carrick move, everyone thought Trocheck was going to be on his way out.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. So I know the Rangers specifically have moved a lot of guys out over the last year or so, but this was a chance to kind of continue to build assets on it. And I'm sure Rangers fans are kind of scratching at their head, wondering why we didn't just take the best available deal. I know Trocheck had, I think, a 12-team list, but at some point, I know like there's no way Minnesota was the only team in on him. So I'd be surprised if they weren't working on other things. But
Yeah.
the way this deadline went, I mean, it's hard to really know what was out there and what teams were saying no compared to what teams were just not offering enough to even get a conversation going. We heard Brad Living talk about how there just it didn't seem like the offers were serious enough for some of their pieces where they might have wanted to sell off. So that's just kind of the way things went this year. But was just hoping for more, I guess. I guess that's the way I'd put it.
I think that it's also like I think that teams probably like we talked about with the cap going up and all this, you don't really need to like feel the need to go out and trade for as many players because you're able to keep more of your own guys, and that's something that I think a lot of these teams probably value. Um, Now, obviously, there's some contracts that people want to get off of, and teams are always going to be looking to trade for our upgrade players. But I think like we saw a couple prices this week that probably scared off some general managers. Like I think that if you're a team, I'm trying to think of some buyers here that probably didn't make as many moves. I would say Ottawa was in that camp. Montreal definitely was in that camp. The Lightning, they didn't give up. They didn't make as many big splashes that you would expect. Dallas probably didn't. They're probably sitting there thinking like this isn't worth it because like you can be in a situation like the Toronto Maple Leafs, like just a year later by giving up so much and then realizing, oh, why did we make this deal a year later? And I watched Ken Hughes' availability, and that's exactly what he alluded to. He's like, I wasn't just going to go make a deal to then scratch our heads next year and say, oh, why the hell did we make this move? It just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. So
The-
I think that there was, in terms of just waiting out the market, like, you know what I mean?
I actually don't mind the fact that the Canadians didn't really do a whole lot
Same.
because I think at that point they were a year ahead of schedule to some degree last year, and so surprisingly, what I've been hearing is surprisingly, the Canadians fan base has been super patient, and this is probably the last deadline where you look at a non-move and say, okay,
Yes,
that is
I
acceptable
would
because
agree.
they're in a wild card spot right now. We talk about how open the East could be. Do they win a playoff game if they end up facing the Lightning or the Hurricanes? I don't know. We still have about 19, 20 games left. They could find their way back into the Atlantic top three. But either way, I think this is probably the last time where you see the market. Kent Hughes goes, this isn't something that I want to just sort of dip my toe in or even waste my time with. And maybe that's what happened to play out in Montreal. But the one team I'm surprised we haven't brought up yet is Carolina, because I
That's
think
that's one team that I was forgetting to mention as well.
right. I
Yeah,
just think like you've been the cream of the crop of the Eastern Conference for a while, but no one takes you seriously, a la sweeps in, the Eastern Conference Finals a lot, be it yes to Florida in a numerous occasions. But that being said, this is an opportunity for you. Outside of Tampa, I don't see a single scary team where you don't want to go in as a Carolina Hurricanes player and on that team and think we can do this. Now, maybe there's demons in the past, but you have Brendamore leading the charge, and that's a guy that I think everyone would go through a wall for. I know maybe the prices weren't there. Like, is Pedersen worth kind of destroying your cap and kind of taking on a contract? I don't know. Maybe that's not the move. But is there anything out there that outside of a Nick Delorier for a 7th rounder that you could have kind of shored up your team with? I'm just a little surprised that they didn't make any moves other than that. It kind of felt like this was an opportunity to go, like, we're all in. Like, this is the year, if anything, that we're at least getting to the Stanley Cup Finals, and we'll take our chances with whoever we play, likely from the Central Division, that might beat up on each other. So maybe, again, we're talking and speculating like we don't exactly know what's going on with the GMs and how it all played out, but just a little surprised with their moves or not lack of moves.
you look at their roster and it's very small. Like they have Logan Stankoven, they have Jackson Blake, they have Nikolai
Ehlers.
Ehlers, they have Seth Jarvis. Like, and these are all great players. I'm not saying they're not good players. The problem is they're gonna get beat up in the playoffs, and so they didn't add any size to their lineup. I've thought that for sure they might address like a 2C and move Stankoven to the wing and put in like a Braden Shen. Like, I thought that was going to be a deal, and seeing what Shen went for, I feel like they should have made a deal like that offer. I think that Vincent Trocheck could have been an option for them. I think that Nazem Kadri could have been an option for them. I think one of those big centers that were available that everyone kept on talking about, they should have went after. I'm not saying a Robert Thomas they need to go after, but like a veteran guy that is going to help them, they needed to get, and they didn't do it. I agree with you, Alex. Like, I'm actually surprised, and I don't know if you guys saw Rob Brindamore's quote last night. He was pretty raw, emotion or passionate about it, which he always is. You're gonna get the honest truth with him and blunt. He was saying that some guys are disappointed with the lack of moves, but you know what? Like, it is what it is, and we got to move forward. So I do think that Carolina's going to look back, and if they don't end up winning the Stanley Cup, which I don't think they will, this is going to be a year where a lot of their fans are going to be like, this could have been the year to go all in on this team, considering how open the East is, as we said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm conflicted with them. They've been shopping at the top of the market for plenty of deadlines before, right? Like the Gensel deal and the Rantanen deal. And we know that actually they were shopping in the top market this year as well. They were one of the teams involved with Artemi Panarin, right? Like they were the one team that Elliot Friedman reported and said they're in on him, extension or no extension. So they've got a standard in terms of the player that they want at a deadline. And I'm wondering if any of the players available this year kind of meet that standard. Definitely a Kadri would help, a Trocheck. They're familiar with him. So a Shen, probably not. But I almost wonder if they look at those deals that they've made before and say, well, we went all in for some big time players twice. Obviously, they didn't move off Rantanen last year before the playoffs, but they make those moves and it didn't really work. And this year, I wonder if they had a little bit of precaution.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I would assume that they're thinking about that as well, but like they also were in on the Marner talk, like in terms of like
Yeah.
trading for or
Once again,
swapping.
that's such a higher level than I think some of the players we're talking about this year.
Yeah, 100%. They want a guy that's going to make or a game changer. They want a game breaker. They made
Yeah.
that deal with Mikko Rantanen. I think they got a game breaker. Obviously, he didn't want to stay there. It's a different situation. But I think that they're probably still in the market for a game breaker. It's just it's hard to see what game breakers really out there. Like,
Yeah.
is Elias Pettersson a game breaker anymore? No. Like, he's just so you're gonna have to eventually, instead of just going and getting a game breaker, why don't you go get a good 2-3 players that are really, really good, just not game breakers, and try to bolster your lineup. That's where we're at with Carolina, I think.
Well, and I think too, when you talk about like the conference and how wide open it is, you look at kind of Carolina's path potentially to another Eastern Conference Finals. Wild card teams right now, I think, are Montreal and Boston. I think if do any of those
Yeah.
teams scare you really in the first round? Then you look to who they might have to play. We talked about it earlier. If it's an Islanders team or a Pittsburgh team in the second round, they're probably feeling pretty good about that too. So they maybe this year, as opposed to some previous years, kind of maybe see it as they're playing with a little bit of house money, and then you combined what Christian said about the type of players they're typically shopping for. If none of them really met their criteria, I'm sure Eric Tulsky was looking at everything because we know he's a guy who doesn't leave any stone unturned. So I assume that they're just pretty confident what they got. I was surprised to hear Brendan Moore talk like that because he's usually a guy that's so raw for the room. And I'm surprised he would kind of look outside and be like, we could have used someone else. Like, no, there should be almost a vote of confidence for your squad to be like, we're confident in our group. We're clearly the head of the Metro division, and we're looking to make another run. And if it doesn't work out, we'll look back and say, hey, but a lot of it, like in past years, it didn't work out either, even when they took those shots. And, you can say they've I'm sure people will go back and forth in terms of whether or not they mortgage their future a little bit, but they're obviously still in a great spot, and they are going to just save their bullets for another year. It looks like.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's a good way to look at it. I didn't think about it. The fact that like it's more the guys in this room have the responsibility and you have the reins. Go take it. You know what I mean? Like I don't hate that. I don't hate that take. So I do think the proof's going to be in the pudding, and maybe it's similar to like kind of the conversation where it's unrelated completely, but like there was all this conversation about Team Canada not staying in the Village. Like it's going to be a conversation either way. If they lose, they should have stayed in the Village. If they win, then not. If Carolina does well, clearly they had the group, and if they don't, the autopsy is going to continue for them in the off season, right? I hate to bring up
Village
old wounds, but that's
Yeah,
the case.
before we go to
Okay,
we go to the
go ahead,
Leafs
Justin.
corner here, because I'm sure that's
Yeah.
where we're going next. I
Yeah.
just wanted to ask, who the biggest winner at the deadline is for you guys? I think there's just one clear answer. I don't think there's very much debate here, but if there's one clear winner for you, who is it?
I
I'm
mean,
gonna
go Brandon. Go.
I'm just gonna go Colorado. I talked about the Kadri deal
Yeah.
earlier. Like it's not so much that I think they gained the most, but I think the rich just got richer, and they're still to me the best team in the NHL, and I think that's kind of where I look. Yeah,
Yeah, Nick Waugh
Yeah.
as well, right? Like that's
absolutely. Yeah.
a deal where it's like that's your guy. Like look at their like down the middle, those guys are unstoppable, and that's where you win.
Down the
So,
middle, it's McKinnon, Nelson, Kadri, and you have Waugh
Waugh.
as your fourth line, and then you have Jack Drury as well, who it could be the fourth line center, but probably is going to have to play wing. It is unbelievable, and they are the biggest winner of this trade deadline by far. And they made the biggest move in terms of going and getting Kadri. In my opinion, that is the biggest move, and they got that done on top of getting Nick Waugh. So I credit them. They're going all in. They realize this is a chance, an opportunity, and they're going to take their bet. And also, they got goes without saying, they also got Brett Kulak earlier in the week by trading out Sam Girard to clear the cap space to make these deals happen. So just great GM work by Chris McFarland on this trade deadline.
Tidy work. I would agree. I think they're definitely the good bet for best buyer. I might say that their trade partner, the Flames, are maybe the winners among the sellers, right? The Kadri deal and the Uyghur deal. Those are some pretty good moves. And at the same time, they could have done so much more too. Like they still have Blake Coleman, right? Who else do they have? They have someone else
White
too
Cloud
that they could
didn't
have.
end up moving.
They
right?
also-
White Cloud
they
was the
also
one guy who
traded-
apparently had these crazy offers for. So they were good, and they could have been even better. So I'd give the Flames credit as well.
I don't know if it counts as their trade deadline, but trading away Rasmus Anderson as well. Like
Yeah.
this year,
Yes.
like they
Yeah.
got even more in their. They have so many picks now in their chamber that it's just like
If you go look at if you go look at just the graphic on Puckpedia where it lays it out over the next 3 years, it's just it's an eye opener looking at that Flames
and they've
cover.
done a great job. And they also have some good prospects that they haven't drafted in like the top echelon of rounds. So to be in a position where they have 4 second-round picks this year, they already have a great prospect pool. It's only going to get better for them.
That Pacific Division is pretty brutal this year, but there's some teams in there that are going to make some noise in the coming years. So you better win while you can, Vegas and the Oilers. I'm thinking about Dallas right now and thinking last year you made it to the conference finals. Yeah, Edmonton took you down and blah, 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 but you were like the cream of the crop of that division. And then you're looking to your left and you have Colorado this year. And then you're like, oh, that's okay. Surely we'll be in second in that division. You look to your right and Quinn Hughes and Brock Faber and Kaprizov and Matt Boldy and now Bobby like they're all like, I don't think so. Like Dallas just by proxy of like didn't really move much is in a really tough spot right now. I'm excited to watch that division kind of basically cannibalize each other. I still obviously I think for lack of a better description, just I don't like the division standings. I think that's a whole different conversation. It's not for today, but it would have been great to see some different matchups to see how those teams sort of met later on. But Dallas is in a tough spot, clearly just based on their standing in the Western Conference. So I don't know.
You always end up with like one Thunderdome division, eh?
Always.
Like it was the Atlantic, right? And now Central, the Metro was that at one point. Every division just takes a turn having Thunderdome year.
I know.
And it's the Central.
Yeah, but I mean, it was inevitable. We're gonna go here, and we're here now. Leafs Corner. You guys talked about the Nick Watt trade, I believe, on the previous pod a couple days ago. But 2 more moves: Bobby McMahon going to Seattle, Scott Laughton going to LA. Let's just roundtable this. Like, how did the Leafs do? I don't know who wants to start. I'm just going to step away from the mic and we're just going to go into it. I know, Christian, you probably got some thoughts. You probably have a whole list of items you want to get into. Let me maybe throw it over to you to start.
Yeah, listen, we've got time limit for the pods, so I'm going to go very condensed here. But, just summing it up for the Leafs deadline, you look at it and you think you got a first, you got a second, you got a third, you got a fourth, you got a fifth. Sounds like Tanner Jeannot. We traded for Tanner Jeannot, guys. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, but that is one of the first thoughts I had there. No, it's a pretty meh deadline. You kind of just got you got a fair amount for the players that you traded, I guess. I do think on the buyer and seller conversation we had before, some of the timing didn't do well for the Leafs. I do think if they had entered this trade market a bit earlier with a Laughton or a McMahon, you're maybe looking at some slightly higher prices. I just heard today James Myrtle on the Leaf Report, The Athletic. He said that he had heard from other execs around the league that Bobby McMahon's comparable for trade return was Kiefer Sherwood, a second pick, 2 second picks. So I do think if you're making that trade closer to when the Kiefer Sherwood trade, that was very early, but let's even just say January, right? Like before the Olympic break, maybe you're actually getting 2 second round picks. Same goes for Scott Laughton. Like Nick Dowd had just gone the day before, I believe, for a little bit more. Michael McCarron, the different player. But once again, I do think they entered the market with those guys a little later. And Nick Roy was more the exception to that rule than the standard, right? So I think that's the first thing there. And then I think really the other thing to talk about was kind of Brad Treliving, right? He did tons and tons of media availabilities as a GM does after deadlines. And my takeaway there is he didn't reveal a lot because I don't think he has the reins to reveal a lot, right? Like he can't be like, well, this is the plan for the summer and next year, because you might not be the one planning for the summer and next year, which I kind of like. I'll stop there for now. You guys can pick it up.
No, I mean, when it comes to the Treliving point, I mean, just like you said, listening to him yesterday, it really felt like he was kind of a dead man walking. Like he just felt like it felt like his tone, even the way he was answering questions,
His
was
voice, man. His
yeah, he
voice.
he sounded so defeated, and it definitely sounded like a guy who knows his tenure might be coming to an end. And not to say that I think that has anything to do with what he decided to really, do during the deadline, but I think there was maybe opportunities to move off of other players, even if the returns weren't as, strong as what people always are going to want. But, I look at, some of the more middling guys at the bottom of the lineup, a guy like Callie Arenburg, who I think has commitment next year to go over to Europe. But like, you're telling me you couldn't have gotten a 6th or 7th round pick for him to, as another team trying to get depth. And I know that's not a sexy move, but the idea of picking up lottery tickets and just trying to continue to fill your organization with young players, that's something that the Leafs have been dreadful at for the last decade. Obviously they've been in a different position, but it just felt like this could have been maybe like a turning point where you start to say, hey, this is where we're going. We heard Treliving say that they will have a plan at some point. Don't know what that means, but clearly shows that this deadline was kind of a fly-by-night thing. And they were just like, hey, here are your options. Do with it what you can. And I think that's exactly what happened. And to be honest, it's kind of sad to look at how this team's operated in the past, and now to be at this point where it feels so like it's just middling, and like they feel like they have no idea what they want to do and where they want to go. And it can't feel good to be in that locker room, whether you're Craig Berube or Austin Matthews or anybody else on the team, and looking around being like, are you going to be here next year? Are you like, what are we doing? So, it's just one of those things that I was a little bit disappointed in, but I don't know that you could have satisfied everyone anyway. So
Yeah, that's the most important thing I think you have to realize is either way, whatever you did, no, everyone was not going to be satisfied with the moves
That's
that he
it.
made. It's
Yeah.
just the organization as itself. Like either way, like Austin Matthews, like we'll talk, like he goes out and says the right thing the other night in terms of like, it's an embarrassing loss. Like this is on me. Like he says what everyone's been wanting for the past like 5 years. And then everyone's like, no, this isn't good. Like everyone's ripping him. So it's just either way.
There's been so many quotes like that, like over the tenure where, it's like you said, Justin, saying the right thing, it's just never followed up with actions. There's plenty of opportunities for Austin and the team as a whole to follow up that comment. He specifically said, we have to have more pride in our play. And since that quote, I've seen zero pride in anyone's play, not just
Yeah.
him. Like, it's just... Yeah,
So
and honestly, that's also with Brad too. Brad is
Yep.
someone who says the right things, and I think there is maybe some concern he might say the right things to his boss to find a way to stick around. So I don't know on the Matthews thing. Sorry, go ahead, Justin. You finished up your thought.
I was just gonna say the most disappointing thing to me, I think, if you look at Puckpedia and you go look at their draft picks, you still have 2-0 Reds in the 2026 first and second rounds. And like getting a first in 2027 is good and all, but like this was supposed to be a fix for next year. Like there's talk about like how do we get back into playoff contention this year? We think this is a one-off. You would think that those picks would try to be for this summer, where they can then flip them at the draft if that's what they're going to do to go get another player. But no, it's not, and they might lose out on a top 10 pick to Boston. So like it's not a good look right now. It's just not.
No, they might not. Like, you've seen them play
True.
the last 3-4 games. This might be the worst team in the NHL, like based on what I've seen. Now, I'm exaggerating. I'm exaggerating. But the way that they've played
I
has
do
been
the math
bad.
every day, man. I'm like,
It's
I'm
hard,
looking.
eh?
I'm like, can we be worse than Vancouver? No. Can you be worse than the Flames? No. The Blackhawks? No. The Blues? No. The Jets?
Right
No,
now,
like, I'm already at 5. I'm already at 5. That's just the West.
Yeah,
They are screwed.
They
They-
just
well,
have
look
to
at
hope
next
for
year.
the tankathon, man. They just gotta hope.
Next year, like, I think it became abundantly clear over the past few weeks, like, if especially, and again, because there's been no clear path next year, and that's probably why a lot of people are so frustrated, is that unless Brad Treliving essentially brought in like Connor McDavid this deadline, like nothing that he would have done would have been successful. You can't please everybody anyways, and that position is very pressure filled, but he would have had to have the perfect deadline, and that's just not possible. And it kind of was clear at the beginning of the day. When you look at next year, already the conversations are we might not have either a head coach, the same head coach, the same GM, or it could be a lot different. Like clearly, I don't think a retool is possible. I think that conversation almost has to be pushed by the wayside unless you bring the same guys back. Like, how do you do that with different voices and no clear plan? So the fact that you don't have a great draft set up this year, it's byproduct of a lot of things. It's a buildup of the past few years, and unfortunately, this is the result. You sort of have to eat a you know what sandwich as a result of this. But I do think that there's so many question marks moving forward. You're glad to have a couple of picks, as you suggested, Christian. Like it's good to kind of get something. The only thing I think, Brandon, about some of those like deeper guys in the lineup, like who's taking Cal Yarncroke? Like, what does he do on a night in, night out basis?
I mean,
is
we
the only problem.
saw David Camp go. We saw
I know,
other like
but
we
he's
saw,
a center, I think, and that's the
Yeah,
only maybe
fair,
thing.
but
Like
We
I
saw
just think
Lucas Reichel go for a 6th-round pick.
I do think
Lucas
there's truth to
Reichel.
when Brad, Brad opened his comments, or like early on, he mentioned it multiple times. The market dictates.
Yeah.
This is what the market dictated. Whatever. I do think that's an excuse, but there is truth to his excuse, and that's why I talked about the timing before, right? Because I think if you enter the market earlier with some stuff, I don't know if there was ever going to be a market for a Cal Yarncroke, but I think once again, like I talked about off the top, the idea that you can bring in some dead money for this year, like trying to get a little bit more creative. I do also read into the fact that we only got draft picks as part of our returns. I think there's just another affirmation that he is on very thin ice because he wasn't given the trust to go out and bring in more players, right? So that's another thing I read into it because
he kept on
I was
talking
willing to trade
about
like
that.
a Nick Robertson for someone of Nick Robertson's age. None of this stuff happened. It was the most vanilla deadline you could have in his position.
Well, the thing too is like
Yeah.
if he's not making those decisions on, who is then? Because if it's Brad Treliving and say this is last deadline, and if he's aware of it or whatever the situation is, there's nobody around him really who's going to be like, hey, go after this type of guy for the future. Then like who's going to say? There's no Shanahan. There's no like everyone below Treliving is not going to really have the goal.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
take
to
it as
say,
he kind
hey,
of wasn't given permission. Like,
and he
Brad,
wasn't
go get
given
draft
any,
picks.
and he wasn't given a direction either. Like you look at like he can't be trusted, obviously, to be the one to say, hey, this is the direction we're going. But at this point in the organization, there's nobody else who is able to do that. So I really don't think we're going to know what this team's plans are until after July 1st, because that's when you can start to really see, what they're going to have to do with what money they'll have. They're going to obviously make some sort of change in the organization. And then it's like, okay, we know we've got some picks for the next year after this. They might be looking at a retool, like a 2-year retool, where it's like this was kind of the start of it. We'll see what happens next year, but we're ready to kind of turn over if we need to. And then going into 27 or whatever, that's maybe when we start to think we can take the jump again. But that's a risky proposition, especially when you have expiring guys like Austin Matthews at some point. Like you don't have forever to figure this out. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction they eventually take at some point.
I do think that, it's so grim. Even me, I jumped on Puckpedia today. I tried to do some stuff. There is like as much as talk we just did about this being a horrible trade deadline, fellas, buckle up. Free agency is going to be worse.
Yeah.
We had Elliott report on Thursday, and it kind of flows under the radar because of trade deadline afterwards that Nick Schmaltz is trending towards a contract extension with the Utah Mammoth. He's one of the top 3 free agents just by points. So then you have Alex Tuch, Darren Radish. All these guys are 29, 30 years old anyways. But after that, it is a goddamn cliff. So you can't go and try and solve anything in free agency. I do think they can definitely do like a Dubas classic of the reverse Dubas classic of, we don't have a 2nd round pick at the draft. Well, on draft day, if our guys there, we'll just go and trade our 2027 second, because they have 2 in 2027. They can trade it to someone, throw in a 5th, pick their guy this year if they want. They're going to have to figure it out before July 1 because they're going to have the guys in place to then have the plan by July 1.
Oh, you got to have the plan in place by June 25th. the day of the
Yeah.
June or whatever that day is. Or
On
day of the
the top,
draft, sorry.
yes, yeah, actually, yes, you're right. Before the draft, and I made the point when me and Justin talked before the deadline. I trust Mark Leach as our head of scouting as far as the draft is concerned. His pedigree and his resume is just way too good. We haven't had time to really analyze his picks yet, but I'm gonna put faith in that way more than our pro scouting. And then yeah, just on the topic of like the retool, rebuild, can you do that with Austin Matthews and William Nylander? That's a very, very heavy question.
Yeah.
I also just want to bring up there was the Matthew Nyes thing. I'm sure you guys saw it as well before the deadline, also in the same piece that Elliot put out. And that one had me scratching my head just as far as you read
They're
it
open to
and it's just,
everything. They're open to
they were open
everything.
to, I think we are going to end up hearing about this in the coming days. Someone's going to have some follow-up report to that. I'll be very curious to hear what it's about,
Well,
but it just strikes me as, sorry,
Elliot
yeah?
said yesterday, like, if he was wrong, he would have heard something. Someone would have called him right away
Yeah,
and
no,
let him know.
I take
and
what
there
Elliot's
was
reporting as gospel as far as there's
there
something
was
to
no
it.
one that called him and said, "Hey, why did you put this out there?" So
Yeah, no,
obviously Matthew Nyes was floated.
Okay, so secondarily, I think anyone who is out on Matthew Nyes after this year or like doubting his potential or whether he should be a core piece to the Leafs moving forward is out of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how people are overreacting to this
I
season for a guy
disagree.
who's hurt. Okay,
No. I
I wanna
disagree
hear
with
your,
what your point
okay.
is because I don't think that's why Matthew Nyes is on the market. I don't think that. I don't think
No, I have
that
heard
is
people just criticizing Matthew Nyes for
okay.
his year
Yeah.
and his body
Yeah.
language and stuff like
So
that.
have
And
I.
I think anyone questioning him moving forward, if you're questioning just specifically his performance this year, sure, we all see that. The body language has been terrible. He's admitted to being injured. He also had a great start to the year where he was
Yep.
our assist leader early on.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fallen apart here. But I don't know. I feel like I've seen simmerings of people like saying like you should move off of him if you're doing a rebuild type of deal. No, like he is the unicorn that people wanted before he was here. I don't know how people can switch up that fast. That type of report is something that can fuel people's opinion in that way. I don't see it. I don't see
the
it.
the way I took the report was, and this is the way that Elliot talked about it is, it had nothing to do with Nyes as a player and the
Yeah.
Maple Leafs not believing in him as a player. It's more so about we got to get as many assets as possible. And this might be the player to get as many assets as possible because if you trade a player like that, you know you're going to get a massive haul in return just because of the age. The contract is very good. And yeah, it's more of an idea of like, we need to rebuild this in the set or retool this and try to get as many picks and assets as possible. And Matthew Nyes might be the best way to do that to then capitalize and put a better team, better surrounding team around Austin Matthews as opposed to just having Matthew Nyes. So that's where I think that reporting came from. And that's where I agree with the reporting.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything you said that's wrong. The only thing I'd say is I don't even think it's probably. I think there's no shadow of a doubt that he would absolutely be the probably the one piece that you'd move that would for sure bring back and stock whatever cupboards you need. But back to the conversation we had earlier, I don't know if Tree Living had the like ability to do that. Like I don't know if he's running the show, but imagine you trade Matthew Nyes and whatever you return you get, you better hope like to God, it's unbelievable. Because then if you have no Brad Tree Living moving forward and you have no young core, hopefully piece in Matthew Nyes, like what does that mean? How do we sort of put this train back on the track? And I think, we can go another half hour if we really needed, but ultimately the body language stuff, it's like, is that just a culture and byproduct of like how the room has been? I think Friedman said on one of the more recent 32 Thoughts conversations, like, they had gone in or he had gone into the room after either the Sens game or one of the recent really tough games for the Leafs stretch, and it was really quiet. And he followed that up to say, like, normally it's not a very like loud room to begin with. It's like, okay, well, why not? Like, what's the problem? That's not a good sign.
Yeah, Brian
so,
Reeves
like,
say that. Remember, it was a quiet room. I know this is
that's not good.
I don't think that's changing. Unless you're changing the people who set the culture in the room, which is like it's a Matthews
and that's the
Nylander.
problem. Yeah.
I came into this year like thinking, okay, well, if this year goes bad, the blame directly shifts to Austin Matthews. There is no Mitch Marner to have blame, and he absorbed a lot of it when he was here. That shield is gone, and you can criticize him. I also do think so much of this is the health. Now, that being said, I don't think you can win without a healthy Austin Matthews. If you don't have healthy Austin Matthews, I'd trade him before I would trade William Nylander or Matthew Knies. You're not going to get a full-on return, but I see no way where you can do retool, rebuild with him on the roster and it end up in a contending team that can actually threaten for Stanley Cup if he's not healthy. Mm-hmm. There's way too many question marks there. It's been way too much of a roller coaster health season going back to even last year. I maybe you have one more regime, but once again, you don't want to have the situation where Brad comes in and says, yeah, I have to take a year to look at all this before we decide if we're trading a Mitch Marner. You don't want to repeat that, but like I am basically at the wit's end as far as what he's looked like from a health standpoint. You can't win with him. You can win with a William Nylander looking like he's checked out bothers me zilch. It really doesn't, because I know that the William Nylander that we all saw for 9 years is in there. Matthews, though, I have such question marks there. It's very disheartening.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Like that's how it is. And like I think we'll have a lot more questions answered in the next coming months, and there's probably not a whole lot of excitement, at least from a Toronto Maple Leafs perspective, for the rest of the season. We're going to see what we've seen so far over the next couple of weeks, I should say. But, that being said, I think that wraps up a pretty quiet deadline, but I think we squeezed as much juice out of it as we can. I don't know if anyone had any final thoughts or things they didn't get to before we kind of wrap things up here.
One last thing for me is I really respect the fact that what the Chicago Blackhawks did for Nick Foligno and putting him and his brother together for a chance to go win a cup. I really respect that, and I think that that's good karma for the Chicago Blackhawks, and I hope that it works out for Nick Foligno. But yeah, it's just a really, really classy move, and obviously they had no retention spots. They couldn't keep any of his salary. So yeah, it's really good on Minnesota as well, because it's a decent chunk of salary to take on Nick Foligno at $4.5 million, but to do it and pair up the brothers, I do like this move for Minnesota.
And I'm actually just the one question I have about that. Obviously, I don't expect everyone to have the answer, but I wonder if there's ever been a GM that's won the Cup and the Olympics in the same year. Like if Minnesota does go ahead and win it all. Like I'm curious if that's something that
we'd have to look, I guess, back at the previous Team Canada GM.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Who was the GM of the Penguins? Well, I guess who won 2010? It was Chicago. So that doesn't really count. 2009, I guess that. It's close to the same.
I see what you mean. No, and then 02 was like Gretzky, I think. Yeah. So it's like you can't really say he won anything as an executive. So.
Yeah, that would be
Damn, Brandon, way to take a shot at the great one.
I mean,
it's not a shot; it's just a fact, bro. Like he hasn't really been an executive anywhere. He was a coach once, and
for the Coyotes. It
didn't work out. So I mean, that's all I know about it. But he did a great job that year. So what can you say?
Yeah,
I enjoyed watching Puck Empire keep track of the insider. So I just want to give a shout out to that. That was really cool.
It honestly didn't feel like it honestly did not feel like Elliott broke 15. I was shocked
that regular day for Elliott.
Yeah, like I felt like it was like more so like a lot of guys. I felt like I felt like a lot of teams had broke trades, and it was obvious that there was seven of them.
I think the NHL finished second in the Art Ross race.
Yeah. So, but I just felt like they broke more trades than what even Elliott broke. It felt like during the day.
Yeah.
So, but Elliott was. Oh, we should mention one last thing.
What's that?
Did you guys see what happened afterwards? What got out about St. Louis? Who I think had a great deadline in terms of getting picks and everything. What do you guys think of that?
That might be so just the context here. Doug Armstrong talked about the fact that after he was disappointed that the leak came out about Parayko's no trade clause, and they basically did an audit of every St. Louis Blues employee's emails and phone numbers and texts to see who leaked it, and everyone came clean according to him. I mean, I don't know. You could just jump on your personal email or whatever. Like, I don't really think it's that hard. I don't know how much it really says there. I think that's probably regular practice if a team doesn't like a leak. Like, I don't know if that was really like going over and above to see who it was. We probably just don't hear about it. Doug Armstrong's just a little bit more
Maybe.
honest, and I think he just gave us a little bit of an
Well,
inside look there. And yeah,
and I heard, I don't know, yesterday on Real Kipper and Born, they had obviously Doug McLean on, and he talked a bit about how when he was with Columbus, obviously the GM president there, that I think one of his first moves, and I'm forgetting who the GM was, but the GM basically told him like,
Yeah.
"Hey, if anything gets leaked here, I know it won't be from my organization; it'll be from yours." And he said he took that, very personally, and that most of the GMs around the league have a good idea of what their close team around them is doing, and but there's always going
Well,
to be those leaks. So, but the
yeah, and
Parayko one
then
is a great example of why you can't run with it until you know, I guess, right? Like it's just it was a bad look for some of those guys, and I hate to say it, but even the Uyghur one, like when he's coming out in an interview with Sportsnet saying, hey, like even in jest saying, Elliott's a weasel or whatever, like it's just a bad look for these guys, and I hate to say
Yeah.
it because they do such great work, and
I
they
will.
are, I'm sure, as tight and accurate as they want to be, but this week, for whatever reason, it clearly showed that there's maybe there's something out for these guys, or they I don't know, but there's just like it was interesting for sure.
Oh yeah,
did Doug
it's
Armstrong check his own texts and emails and phone number? Maybe.
but it was funny because the Uyghur one, like he took it. Mackenzie Uyghur, like you can tell he's a good guy.
For sure.
But he said it in a joking way, and that was kind of the funny part. Is like I don't know how Elliott knows everything, but because it almost feels like I forget who the soccer reporter is at the moment. The
Fabrizio
one of the
Romano.
yes, literally. I
I don't
remember
even
there
watch
was
soccer, guys, but yeah.
there was one guy
Anyways.
like there was one guy that got traded or got was getting a transfer, and like he's like, yeah, I had no idea that they were even thinking about moving me until, or someone was gonna pay for me until, like he broke the news, and like I did not know. So like these guys
Yeah.
have sources that just, yeah, they're
My
very
my
much.
final thought here, you know, there's been the trend of, I've brought this up, and maybe this is what the Leafs should do, is hire an agent as a GM. Like Kent Hughes has done a good job with that. Bill Zito was an agent before he was an assistant GM in Columbus. There's always been talk about, like, I feel like Elliott, like 10 years ago, said that he was approached about like a front office job with an NHL team. I feel like they couldn't even allow him to do it. Like he
No.
knows too much now. I would love to see, like, we have Woj who went the college route, but love to see an insider actually end up with one of these exec jobs and see the job they do, because that would be
That's
fascinating.
that's
They
risky.
they would have to literally like bring Elliot in like a interrogation room and go, let's see all of your phones.
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
one. Let's bring out all your phones. Well, they'd have to raid his house. They'd have to get a warrant and go, hey, like we're taking everything. And now
Yeah.
come in and I don't know. It's just one of those things. So that's a
Like
great point.
something
though.
something tells me he might know what Ken Hughes was talking about here with this massive trade that he was apparently doing that didn't get over the finish line.
He probably knows what Ken Hughes had for breakfast, dude. I don't
Probably.
know anymore. So no,
Crazy.
fun stuff there to wrap up though, boys. But good chat. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. We'll have a lot more conversation, NHL and really other league wise, but big day supposedly yesterday. So thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts, anything we missed, please comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Otherwise, we'll catch everyone next week.